Welcome to a Classic Game Room competitive review where today I bring you a battle of giants. Because today I'm talking about the PlayStation 2 versus the original Xbox. Which game system is better to collect for today? Both powerhouse game systems from the early 2000s and incredibly popular. The PlayStation 2 may have sold more units, but the Xbox was arguably more powerful. Which game system is better to collect for today? Before I get started, before I really get into this and manage to offend everyone in one way or another, because, some of these competitive reviews can be silly, like Magnavox Odyssey 2 versus Wii U, that's just not fair. Poor Wii U. It doesn't have a keyboard built into it, and its game cartridges don't have handles. That's an automatic loss. But the PlayStation 2 and the Xbox are both awesome. And they're both reasonably affordable to collect for today, excluding the rare games. Both game systems are in that sweet spot for collecting right now. Because they're not considered retro yet. They're not retro cool. The PlayStation 2 and the Xbox are just kind of obsolete. But I think it's one of the most exciting eras of video games, the early 2000s, when we got big games that tried big things before they just turned into franchises. So, I think collecting for the PlayStation 2 and the Xbox is a lot of fun and a pretty good value, because there's a lot of these games out there. They're not retro cool like the NES or the Super Nintendo or the Sega Saturn or something, so it's easy to get out there and collect those PlayStation 2 and Xbox games. Most people just don't want them. You can find a lot of great games for those two game systems for just a couple bucks, for under $5. You've got the big franchise titles like Halo, and Gran Turismo, and Forza, and God of War, and Killzone. Both game systems have Grand Theft Auto Vice City, so it's a tie there. One of my personal favorite games. I actually haven't played the Xbox version of that game, but I'm a PlayStation 2 guy. I bought a PlayStation 2 about a year or so after it was released, and I love it. I love the PlayStation 2. I've loved it for years, played countless hours of games on it, Gran Turismo's, Grand Theft Autos. I'm a big fan of that Sylpheed game on PlayStation 2. More recently, I found myself really enjoying Xbox, and Panzer Dragoon Orta, and Forza, or Forza, however you pronounce that game. The Xbox has a lot of great games, not to be overlooked. In many cases, you'll find that the Xbox and the PlayStation 2 have the same games on each game console. Perhaps the Xbox One is better. In fact, in a lot of cases, I've seen that it is. But the PlayStation 2 was more popular, so there's more games on the PlayStation 2. A lot more games, actually. Which game system is better to collect for today? Well, sometimes in a competitive review, the choice is obvious. MSX computer versus Gamecom? Yeah. Again, you go with the one that has a keyboard. Also, the Gamecom sucks. PlayStation 2 versus Xbox isn't quite as obvious. I'd say PlayStation 2, for the most part, is probably a little bit more affordable and more accessible. If you go to a used game store, they're probably throwing out a bunch of PlayStation 2 controllers, so you can pick those up reasonably cheap. The Xbox, on the other hand, is a little bigger. I kind of like them both. The choice would be easier if one of them was made by Sega, of course, but a lot of people would throw out there that the Xbox is like the spiritual successor to the Sega Dreamcast, since a lot of the games I think that they had planned for the Dreamcast ended up on the Xbox, like Shenmue 2. I think Panzer Dragoon Orta was destined for the Dreamcast, and that's a wonderful Xbox game, an absolute must-play. But the PlayStation 2 is just, it's got so many games. So many games, especially when you consider that it's backwards compatible with the PlayStation 1, and that opens up a whole new world of games for you, or I guess an old world of games, the older PlayStation games. A PlayStation 2 will provide you endless hours of entertainment, infinite hours of entertainment. Not to say that the Xbox won't, but I think there's just more to play on the PlayStation 2, and so much of it is really good. Now, there's a lot of bad games as well, but you can find a lot of great games on the PlayStation 2, but the same can be said for the Xbox. I think the Xbox game system itself feels like a higher-end piece of electronics than one of the PlayStation 2 Slims, but it also feels like it has a lot more to break. And anytime the game system is more complicated, that means there's way more things that can go wrong. PlayStation 2s are dirt cheap. Xboxes will cost you a little bit more, but not much. Definitely more in the shipping because they're way heavier. And it's a huge game system, so if space is tight, you may want to consider a PlayStation 2 Slim. I kind of like the PlayStation 2 in this battle, but I also really like the Xbox. So both game systems have Time Splitters Future Perfect, and Time Splitters 2, at least. They both have Vice City. The PlayStation 2 has Gran Turismo, but Xbox has Forza. PlayStation 2's got God of War, but those first two Halo games were incredible. They've both got great controllers and good video output, optical audio output. It's close. This is a close one. As a PlayStation 2 fan, since I've had a PlayStation 2 for years. In fact, I have like 4 of them. Cover the Japanese games, European games, PS2 Slim. My old PS2 is still working for some games, not all of them. As a PlayStation 2 fan, I love experiencing the Xbox games that I missed. So I'm going to throw that out there as a great reason to pick up an Xbox if you're a PlayStation 2 owner. Because there's a lot of stuff you might have just missed, and the same can be said for Xbox owners. If all your buddies had Xboxes or PlayStations, it's likely you missed something. And this is a wonderful era of video games, the early 2000s, before everything got bought up and just merged into like 2 companies, all churning out more or less the same franchise titles and sequels. This was an exciting era for video games. And the fact that the PlayStation 2 can even take you back into the late 90s with the PlayStation 1 games, and that's also a really exciting era. I like them both. I like the PlayStation 2 and the Xbox. I'm going to lean towards PS2 in this one, but this is a hard one. It's coming close to a tie, but really it depends on your budget and which games you want to play. Check out the game libraries. You really can't go wrong with either. If you're on a tighter budget and you don't have either of them, I'd probably recommend you go PlayStation 2 first, but the Xbox is also a terrific buy these days. So here in conclusion, if you're going to jump on either of these game systems, now is the time to do it. Because they're not retro cool yet. Look what's happened to NES prices. Get in there while you can. Buy up all the PlayStation 2 and Xbox games now. Now! And then enjoy some Time Splitters. And Grand Theft Auto Vice City. And God of War. And Halo. And Panzer Dragoon Orta. There's so many games that I like on these game systems. I'm just like clogged. I can't think of all the good games from this era, but there's so many of them. So, happy hunting, and thank you for watching Classic Game Room. I'll see you back here in Game Boy versus Game Gear. Which game system is better to collect for today? That's a good one. If you're going to buy the game anyway, buy it through ClassicGameRoom.com. Classic Game Room is supported by fans on Patreon. Thank you. Now prepare for the Lord Carnage Club, where I celebrate these backers on Patreon by shouting their name in a volcano! Derek Langley. Beer is the trick. Steven Chucknick. From New Jersey, Michael Fernandez. People not named Michael Fernandez aren't Michael Fernandez. Al Stiver. Woo! EDM! Jason from British Columbia. Philip Strabenmuller from Vienna, Austria. Cue the thunder. Jeff, Captain Dauntless, Breyer. Cue the lava. I don't know what lava sounds like. It sounds like this. Jack Stavris from Australia. Ohad Kane, Master of Thunder. Chip Sankvale, fighter of Space Bees! Woo! Rick DeBarros gets the extra disco. Michael and Ariana Nelson, fighters of the future! That's enough disco, because now it's time to shout, Busy Signal! That's right, and keep the volume loud and the party rocking for Sean Zoltek. Really? No. Sean Zoltek! Sergio Matthias Hergert! Tubular. Will.